It began like any ordinary morning. Not the kind that demands attention. Not the kind that makes headlines. Just a quiet transition from night to day, as nurses ended their shifts and the city turned its gears. She walked alone across the lot. A nurse in uniform. Carrying nothing but her bag and the weight of another night spent holding the line between life and death. The security camera watching her movement never blinked. It didn't hesitate. It caught everything, but said nothing. She reaches her car. Unlocks it. Steps inside. The door shuts. That's it. No screams. No struggle. No one running. Just silence. Then, stillness. Then, absence. The next time her name would be spoken aloud, it wouldn't be in a hospital corridor. It would be on the news. Because by the time anyone realized something was wrong, she wasn't just missing. She was gone. This is the story of Patrice Wilson. And what the camera didn't see. This is True Crime Tangle. True stories, real people, and the moments everything changed. In this episode, a woman leaves work in a city that never really sleeps. What follows will leave a trail through hospital walls, police tape, and something far more personal. Detroit. A city where grit and grace live side by side. It's a place not only shaped by struggle, but also by strength, where entire communities are built around hard work, survival, and care for one another. In the heart of this urban sprawl stands one of its most vital institutions, Detroit Receiving Hospital. For decades, it's been the first line of defense for emergencies in the city, a place where lives are saved, where pressure never sleeps, and where every moment matters. Among the many who walked those corridors each day was Patrice Wilson. She was 29. A nurse. A mother. Someone whose life was wrapped up in the rhythm of long shifts and quiet moments at home. Colleagues described her as grounded, serious about her job, but not someone who sought attention. She preferred to let her actions speak, how she attended to patients, how she handled the chaos of a trauma ward with composure that others leaned on. But her world, like anyone's, extended beyond the hospital walls. In her private life, Patrice had once been in a relationship with a man named Jameer Miller. They had known each other well. Some said the bond seemed close at one point, though others remembered it differently, tense, unstable. In recent months, she had begun to create distance. That decision, while personal, had ripple effects she may not have fully seen. What existed between them was no longer simple. What she carried with her, her professionalism, her responsibilities, her silence, concealed complications that didn't show up on any chart. At work, she was dependable. At home, protective. But the boundaries she tried to keep clear were already under quiet pressure. And as the spring weeks unfolded in 2023, she continued to show up, to work, to her role, to her child, unaware that the last days of her routine were counting down. On the morning of May 13, 2023, just before 7:45 a.m., the staff exit at Detroit Receiving Hospital saw its usual flow of nurses and technicians wrapping up another long shift. The weather was calm. The streets were still. Security footage would later confirm what no one standing there noticed at the time: one of those staff members would not be making it home. Patrice Wilson, wearing dark scrubs and carrying her bag, made her way across the staff parking lot toward a black Lincoln Nautilus. Her routine was familiar. The timing was nothing unusual. But this was no ordinary walk to a car. As she approached the vehicle, a man intercepted her. His appearance altered with a light wig, a brimmed cap, and oversized glasses. There was no loud confrontation, no warning. He produced a handgun. Under threat, he directed her to the passenger side. Then he got behind the wheel. From that moment forward, Patrice was no longer in control of what came next. Her vehicle was seen leaving the lot minutes later. There was no pursuit, no report, because at that time, no one yet knew anything was wrong. The next 24 hours unfolded in quiet confusion. Messages went unanswered. Calls went to voicemail. Family and friends began to sense something wasn't right, though it would be hours before concerns turned to fear. It wasn't until the following day, Sunday, May 14th, that a grim discovery was made. At an apartment complex in Novi, roughly 30 miles from the hospital, authorities located the same Lincoln SUV. Parked. Still. Locked from the outside. Inside the trunk was Patrice Wilson. She had been shot multiple times. The cause of death was confirmed on scene. The apartment complex was sealed off. Evidence was logged. Forensic teams began their work. What had begun as a quiet disappearance now shifted to something else entirely. Something that left no room for doubt. The moment Patrice Wilson was found, everything changed. The vehicle was no longer just evidence, it was now a crime scene. The Detroit Police Department, already alerted to her disappearance, mobilized. The urgency was immediate. Detectives began with the only clear starting point, the hospital. Surveillance cameras mounted across the staff parking lot had recorded the last moments before Wilson vanished. Officers reviewed the footage frame by frame. What they saw didn't raise questions, it gave answers. A man approached her SUV. He wasn't rushing. His disguise, a wig, a low-brimmed hat, thick glasses, concealed his identity from a distance. But it didn't hold up under scrutiny. From the video, it was clear, he wasn't just confronting her. He was waiting. Timing her exit. Moving with purpose. As investigators examined this footage, they also began collecting statements. Hospital staff remembered Patrice that morning. She hadn't mentioned meeting anyone. There were no signs she expected trouble. But a few who'd seen the man in disguise near the parking lot recognized something off. Their descriptions aligned. The name that surfaced in the early hours of the inquiry was one officers already knew, Jameer Miller. By then, law enforcement had begun cross-referencing locations. The apartment complex where the SUV had been found lay miles from the hospital. Inside, nothing indicated she had driven herself there. With Miller named as a person of interest, a deeper check uncovered a record stretching back years, assault charges, violations tied to domestic incidents, and prior convictions involving weapons. The context painted a clear pattern. This wasn't random. It wasn't spontaneous. As the case expanded, departments outside Detroit coordinated. Information was exchanged between precincts in Inkster, Garden City, and Novi. Digital footprints, vehicle movements, and witness reports continued to narrow the scope. And then, without prompting, on May 14th, less than 2 days after Wilson's disappearance, Jameer Miller entered a precinct and turned himself in. There was no chase. No dramatic arrest. He walked in, and within moments, the case transitioned from search to custody. But what remained unanswered was the part that couldn't be seen on footage or read in a file: why? And whether the decision to surrender had come from guilt, or calculation. After surrendering to authorities, Jameer Miller was placed under formal custody. The charges brought against him were severe. Among them, homicide in the first degree, robbery involving a motor vehicle, illegal possession of a firearm, and multiple related counts. Each accusation carried its own weight, but together, they painted an undeniable picture of premeditation and violence. Court documents outlined a structured prosecution. With surveillance evidence, location data, and eyewitness accounts firmly aligned, the legal path ahead appeared decisive. A trial was anticipated. Preparations began. Prosecutors indicated readiness to pursue the highest penalties available. But just as the process gathered momentum, a change occurred. In October 2023, Miller entered a plea of guilty to a lesser charge, second-degree murder. It was a strategic move, one that bypassed a full jury trial. With that agreement, other pending charges were withdrawn. No deliberation. No cross-examinations. Just a signed document, and a quiet acceptance of responsibility, at least in the eyes of the law. The following month, judgment was handed down. On November 7th, inside a Wayne County courtroom, sentencing commenced. The chamber was still, except for the sounds of restrained emotion. The presiding judge, measured in tone, firm in delivery, read aloud the outcome. Miller would serve no less than 35 years. He would remain behind bars for up to 60 years. The sentence, 35 to 60 years in Michigan State Prison. Then the floor was given to the family. One by one, those closest to Patrice stood and spoke. Their statements were not polished or practiced, they were raw. Her grandmother stood at the podium. Her voice didn't shake. It held something else entirely, a grief too deep for language, sharpened into rage. She spoke to the man seated just feet away, calling out what could never be repaired. The pain in the room wasn't abstract. It was personal, immediate, and impossible to contain. Miller was offered a chance to speak. His words were brief. He said he was sorry. But nothing he could offer, not an apology, not an explanation, shifted the silence that followed. As the hearing adjourned, no one clapped. No one cheered. There was no sense of victory. Just the conclusion of a legal process, and the beginning of a sentence that would run parallel to the one already lived by those left behind. The courtroom closed its doors. The sentence was handed down. But for Patrice Wilson's family, the legal process had only just begun. In the months that followed, they took their next steps, not against the man who pulled the trigger, but against the place where it all began. A civil action was filed. The target, Detroit Medical Center. The allegation, failure to protect. The claim centered on a key detail. Witnesses reported seeing a man, unfamiliar, motionless, watching, in the parking area hours before Patrice left the building. Her family argued that this wasn't just a failure of foresight. It was something deeper, a breach of obligation, a lapse that left a fatal gap in a system meant to shield its own. The suit demanded a staggering sum, $200 million. Not for revenge. For responsibility. For acknowledgement. Outside the courtroom, the conversation widened. The circumstances of Patrice's death brought fresh urgency to a subject long discussed but rarely confronted with clarity. What happens when someone tries to walk away from a volatile partner, and isn't protected where they should be safest? The questions weren't abstract. They pointed to gaps in workplace protocols. Gaps in recognizing signs. Gaps in reacting before harm occurs. Experts weighed in. Policymakers listened. The term, domestic violence, had always been heavy, but here, it was reframed as a matter of occupational safety. Could employers identify red flags? Should institutions be trained to respond when personal risk intersects with professional life? As these dialogues grew louder, Patrice's name became more than a headline. It became an example. Theories surfaced about missed opportunities, unseen warnings, and what could have been done differently. None of them could reverse what had happened. But each one pushed the story beyond a single act, towards something broader. An examination of what systems failed her, and how many others could be just as exposed. What remains, even now, is that haunting stillness. The kind that comes not from mystery, but from knowing the truth too late. What happened to Patrice Wilson wasn't just tragic, it was preventable. She left her job that morning expecting, as so many do, to make it safely home. She had plans. A child. A life. And yet, even surrounded by people, even inside a hospital's gates, she wasn't beyond reach. Her story reminds us that violence doesn't always wait in the shadows. Sometimes it walks into daylight. Sometimes it knows your routine. Sometimes it follows you to work. And when systems fail to recognize the signs, when spaces meant to protect do not prepare for what might come, what's left are questions no family should ever have to ask. Did the outcome deliver accountability? Was the sentence enough? That's a question we leave to you. Do you believe justice was truly served in this case? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this matter to you, stories that ask hard questions and confront what too often goes unseen, then join us. Subscribe to True Crime Tangle for more true accounts that deserve to be remembered.